Hey guys, SimCoder here, and today we're going to move forward on our Instagram clone app. We are going to implement comments into our posts. So this will be kind of tricky. The database is a bit more complicated than we are used to, but it is possible to do even with Firestore, so I'm going to show you in this lesson how to do it. So let's do it. Before carrying on with the video, I just want to let you know that only around 20% of you guys are actually subscribed to this channel, so if you don't want to miss any single video in the future, be sure to subscribe and to hit the notification bell. Okay, so here we are in our database, Firestore database, and I'm going to show you the structure for how we are going to allow the user to comment on a post. So the first thing that we are going to do is to go into the post that we want, and I'm going to go into these users posts. Remember, this is the user ID, and these are the posts that this user has created. Then inside here we have a document for each and every single post, and if you click it, previously we just had this. So we had fields for this document, which contain the caption, the creation date, and the download URL for the image. However, right now we are going to do things a bit differently. We are going to create yet another collection inside of this document, which will be called comments. And in comments, you'll have a document for each and every single comment that's created, and inside of that document you have the creator and the text. So it is a bit complicated, the tree is getting bigger, but you can easily follow up if you pay close attention. We will have a collection here, and then the documents for the comments. That's basically it. However, this complicates the code somewhat, because remember, within Firebase Firestore, you can only access one collection at a time. And because we are creating yet another collection inside of the document, we won't be able to gain access to it just with one query. So whenever we make a query in order to view this post, for example, we are only able to see these attributes. We are not able to see this collection. So we'll have to find a clever way of doing this, and by the end of this lesson we'll be able to do it. Okay, so coming into our VS Code, I'm going to go into our feed.js, and in here we are going to add a button which will allow us to go into comments.js. Comments.js hasn't been created yet, but we'll do in a second. So let's make this bigger, come in here, and let's say text, and this will be a simple text view, so we don't have to worry that much about it. View comments, ... and inside here we are going to say that on press, and this is really important, we say equal to open curly brackets, open arrow function. We are going to then navigate to the comment screen. Now, it doesn't exist yet, but again, we'll create it in a second. So in this case, it will be navigation, or better yet, props.navigation.navigate, and we are going to navigate to a screen that doesn't exist yet, but it will be called comment. This comment will be responsible for displaying all of the comments of a single post. Okay, then we can go into a new line, open curly brackets, and we are going to pass along the parameters needed by the comment screen. So what parameters does it need? Well, it needs to know the post ID. That's the most important thing, obviously, because otherwise it won't know which post to fetch the comments of. And with that, it will be able to know exactly what to do with the information that is given to it. And there we go. We have everything as it should be. Let's indent this to make it pretty, like that. Okay, so this text will be calling the comment page, but we don't have the comment page yet again. So let's create it right now. Let's go into main and say comments.js. When you create comment.js, an empty file will be created, but I'm going to call rfc in order to quickly create the boilerplate function that we need. Okay, so at this moment, let's leave it at that, and let's go into app.js and import it in here. Remember, in app.js, we have all of our, if we go below, our navigation containers, so we'll must add the comment page in here, otherwise the user won't be able to reach it. So the first thing that we are going to do is to import the comment screen from, and in this case it will be components main comments. There we go. Now we have our comment screen imported. Now all that's left is to add it to the stack navigator in order to be able to reach it. So let's go down below, and we are not going to add it to the navigation container of the auth system. We are going to add it into the navigation container of the main logged in users system. I'm going to double up on the save screen and call it comments. Now, instead of component save screen, we are going to pass along the component comment screen, and there we go. We can leave the navigation in case it is needed. Now, going into comment.js, we are going to finally work on the comment page. Okay, so in here we'll need to import a couple of things. The first of which will be from React, and they are use states, because we'll need to use this hook, and the use effect, because we'll also need to use this function, which acts like a componented mount or componented amount. It is basically the life cycle of a function component. Okay, then we are going to import some elements that we'll use, and in this case it will be view, text, flat list, a button, and an input text, or better yet, a text input. In React, it is the other way around from what it usually is. And this is imported from React Native. Okay, now we have all of the elements that we'll use, and we are free to move forward. So we are going to import as well Firebase from Firebase, and we are going to require Firebase/Firestore, because we'll make the calls to Firestore in here. We are not going to use Redux for this. It is much easier to go straight to the point and do it inside of these function components. So that's basically it. Now, going inside the function components, we are going to quickly add all of the variables that we'll use in these components. So the most important one will be obviously comments. These will contain the list of all of the comments that we'll use, and set comments. We'll use this in order to set the variable to the list of comments that we'll get from Firebase. And use states. This will be an empty array in the beginning state of the function. Whenever it is called, it will have this value. Okay, then we'll say const open brackets post ID and set post ID, and we have to do this in order to compare the post ID with the previous post ID in order to know if we must fetch the data again or not. This will be more clear in a second, but for now just type in this variable. Okay, and then finally we'll have the message that the user wants to send, or better yet, the comment that the user wants to send. So we must store that data somewhere, and it will be on a variable called text. So whenever the user types into the text input that we'll create in a second, this variable will be updated. So text, use state, empty, an empty string. Obviously, we don't need to pass along anything in there. So next, we are going to create a function use effect. This function, we've used it previously, and as I've said in the beginning, it acts kind of like the componented mount does in the class components, which we already used, and it just basically helps you with the lifecycle of the function, or better yet, you can easily trigger functions whenever you want to, just by updating a variable. So in this case, we want this function to be updated whenever and let me come in here, this post ID changes. So whenever the post ID changes, everything that's inside here, which will be the calls to Firebase, must get updated. So in that case, we can say props.routes.params.post ID, which is the variable that's passed along from here. We can access it like this. So whenever this variable changes, this use of effect must be triggered once again. So now inside it, we'll say, and let's give it some space to breathe. If this variable, let's grab it and paste it inside here, is different from the post ID that we already have, then run the query to Firebase, otherwise don't. This is just to make sure nothing is wasted, we don't make any extra calls than those strictly necessary, and it will be useful when we try to display the user's name along with the comment. So for now, let's add this if, just to make sure nothing gets wasted. Okay, and now we are finally able to make the call. So Firebase Firestore dot collection posts, and remember the data structure that we've placed in here. So we have posts, then the user ID, then user posts, then the document with the post ID, then comments, and only here do we access the documents. Okay, so let's try to follow up on that structure. So doc props.routes.params, and in here we need the user ID. So I don't believe I added before. No, I didn't add it. So let's do it now. In here say UID item.user .uid. Okay, now everything is done within feed, and we are able to access all of the data that we need inside comments. So we have the document with the user's ID, that's the owner of the post. Then we have the collection, and I forgot the dots. Collection with the user posts. Let's check in here. That's this collection right here. Then we'll need the doc with the post ID. So in that case, it is this variable right here, and we can freely paste it inside there. Then finally, we have the collection with the comments. And there we go. Now all that we have to do is do a get, obviously. So get, and we say then snapshot, open our function. And in this snapshot, we'll get all of the data necessary to update the comments.js, the view. Okay, so in this case, we are free to do let comments equal to snapshot dot docs dot map, and we are going to map out everything that comes from this snapshot inside docs. Open our function. Let's come in here, and now we'll simply create this array with the information that's given, and we'll decide what goes inside it. So in this case, I want the const.data to be equal to doc.data, and this will be the data of the comments, which in this case will contain, let's come in here, will contain, not this, will contain the text and the creator, right? And the const ID, which will contain the ID of the comments. So in this case, it will be doc.id. Okay, and in order to build out this object and insert it into the comments list, all that we have to do is return the object like we want it. So in this case, it will be ID, and then we'll aggregate the data inside it and add everything that's inside data to the object. This basically means that if data has creator and the text, then the final object will have ID, then creator, then text. That's what it does, and that's really, really useful. Okay, so after it is done, we can say set comments to comments for now, and we can say set post ID to props route params post ID. Okay, I'm going to actually add it after the Firebase query. I'm going to indent everything, and there we go. When this if is triggered, it will get all of the comments from a post that the user wants to see. Now all that's left is going to our return and show the data to the user. After that, we are going to learn how we can send a comment to the database. So the first thing that we are going to do is to add a view. And this view will contain a flat list, just like we've used before. So this flat list allows you to quite easily display lists of big arrays in the user screen without many issues. So the number of columns, in this case it will be 1. Then we'll set horizontal to false, because it won't be horizontal, it will be vertical. And I'm not quite sure if that's the default value, but well, let's import it. It does no harm. So the data that will show in this flat list is contained inside comments. This is the list that contains every single element that will be displayed in our flat list. And finally, we render the item. So this function, we can decide exactly what each item will look like. So let's do it like this: add parentheses, add curly brackets, item, and then after the parentheses, add an arrow function, which in this case isn't an arrow function. It is an arrow function, but with parentheses in order to render out whatever is inside it. Okay, so inside here we'll have a view, because remember, in here, whenever you render an item like this, you can only have one parent tag. So in this case, this will be our parent tag, which will contain every single thing that's inside of this item. So for now, we'll just have a really simple text, which will contain the text of the comment. So in this case, it will be item.text. And there we go, as easy as that. So right now everything should be working. So let's give it a quick run and see if everything checks out. Okay, so here we are, and I made a couple of mistakes that we have to correct. The first of which is I didn't add props to the comment function, and without doing this, we are not able to access props, so an error will be given. And the other one was here, and it was a total distraction of mine. These parentheses isn't closed here, it's closed here. Otherwise, it will give an error, but yeah. So now going into the app, if we go into view comments, you'll see that 4 comments appear. And these 4 comments are from this post right here. And as you can see, the texts are just like what we have in here. So it is working. Okay, so now what's left is to, first of all, send a comment to the database. And let's take care of that right now. So in the comment function, let's go down below, below flat list, and below this tag, we are going to add a view, which will contain both the text input and the button. So the text input will be quite simple. Let's add it here, and it can be a self-closing tag. There's no need for it to occupy any more space. It will have a placeholder, which will be comment, or something like that. We are free to change this to whatever you want. And it will have an onChange text. This onChange text is called whenever the text changes, whenever the user adds a character, removes a character, copies a character, all of that, or better yet, pastes a character. Whenever something changes within the text input, this function will be called. And we use this in order to update the variable text, which we'll then use in order to know which text to send to the database. Okay, add that. Now let's add the button, which will make sure you are able to send the text to the database. So a self-closing tag yet again. Let's go down below. So in here we'll say on press will be equal to open arrow function, and in this case it will be on comment send. This is a function that we haven't created yet, but we will in a second. Okay, that's it. Then the title will be equal to send, and there we go. Now all that's left is to create this function, and the user will be able to finally send a comment to a post. Okay, so going up top, below the use effects, we are going to create this function. So const on comment send equal to open parentheses and then our function. By doing this, we have our function created. Now all that's left is to actually send it to the database. And for that, we are going to copy, or better yet, grab these Firebase Firestore collection and docs because it is the same, and we are going to add it in here. But instead of get, we are going to say add. When you do add, an ID is automatically generated for this new doc, and it adds whatever you want inside it. In this case, we want to add the creator, which will be firebase.auth.currentuser.uid, and the text that again, we updated in this onChange text function. And that way we'll be able to use it. So let's give it a quick run and see if everything checks out. Okay, so here we are within our app. Let's type some things like, don't forget to subscribe, and let's send it. Now, if we send it, nothing changes within our app. But let's take a look in the database. Let's give it a quick refresh. And let's try to see if anything updated here. And there we go. We have our comment here. So that means that if we go back into our comments, the comment will appear in there. So there we go. It is working, but it doesn't look all that useful right now, from the point being that you can't see which user sent the comment. So that's what we are going to take care of right now. So now this part will be the most complicated part of the lesson. We are going to learn how we can actually display the information of the user that made the comment. Now, this might not be the most efficient way of doing it, but using Firestore, it is one of the better ways of doing it, which is you fetch the comments. Then you have to do another query in order to fetch the user's information, and then you merge everything together. So for that, we are going to make full use of the Redux functions that we have in here. So let's go into users, and we are going to store each and every single user's information inside here. Now, we won't store every single posts that the users make because we only want to fetch the posts of the users that we are currently following, because those are displayed within our feed. For the users that we want to just display the information, we are not going to fetch the posts. So let's make a difference between the users and the users loaded. The users loaded will be the users following loaded. So these are the users that the currently logged in user is following, and this integer will just let us know how many users that the currently user is following have loaded with the posts included. So let's quickly make that change, just make the code a bit more coherent. Okay, then going into feed, it is also used there. So if you go below, you see that users loaded appears in here and it appears up top. Users loaded. Users loaded. Okay. So this part is done. Now we make the clear distinction between the users that the current user is following and the general amount of users. But we have to go into actions. We have to go into actions because some things will change in here. Primarily in the fetch users data. Right now, it is always fetching the user's posts, or better yet, it is always calling this function which will fetch the user's posts. But again, we aren't interested in that. So let's say get posts, and this will be a boolean which will pass along, letting us know if we are meant to fetch the user's posts or not. So we are going to grab this line, which we'll call the fetch user's posts function, and we are going to say if get posts is true, then run the fetch users following posts. Otherwise, don't. Okay, so if you go up top into where it is called from the fetch user following, we must add the tag, the boolean to true in order to make sure that the users following posts will be called. Okay, so apart from that, there's not any other changes that we must do in the index.js. We are free to go into comment.js and actually use the information that we get from there and decide which users we must get the information from and those that we already have, so there's no need to do that. And for that, we are going to go into use effects and create a function. The function will be called match user to comments. It will receive the comments list, and by opening up in here, we'll be able to do anything that we want. So in this case, we'll be looping through each and every single comment. This is needed because we must attach a user to every single comment yet again. So let's say let I equals to 0 to I smaller than comments.length I++, add curly brackets, there we go. Now we are going to try to find the user that is inside users that contains the comment.creator. Remember that's passed along in our comment object. We have the creator, which is the UID, and that's what we are going to use. However, we don't have Redux yet in our comment.js. So let's take care of that now. Go up top and say import connect from React Redux. Then yet again we are going to import bind action creators. And we are importing this because we'll be calling where it is this function, I believe. Yeah, we are going to be calling the fetch users data from the comment.js, so we must update it in here. From Redux. And finally, we are going to import the fetch users data, which is the function that we'll use in this screen. And this will be imported from, go back one directory, go back another directory, and say Redux, actions, index. And there we go. Now we have everything imported. However, we must connect it to this function. For that, we are going to remove the export default from this function because we are going to do it down below. We are going to do it inside here. But it is a lot of code, so what I'm going to do is actually go into main.js, there we go, and I'm going to grab everything that's down below at the bottom. This map state to props, map dispatch to props, and connect is what is necessary in order to connect our function to Redux. Okay, so let's add it in here, but it will be somewhat different because, well, we don't want any of these functions. We want the fetch users data, just that. In here, it isn't main, it is comments. And we want in here to get just the users. That's all of the information that we need in order to display the user information, obviously. And don't forget to add user states. Okay, so there we go. Now in our props is all of the information that we need in order to attach a user to a comment. So as I was saying before that, we must find the user that corresponds to the comments.creator. For that, we'll say const user equals to props.user.find, open parentheses, x arrow function x.uid, and let's go a bit on the side, close that up, uid equal to comments I dot creator. This is the UID of the creator, obviously. And whenever we run this function, if a user exists that corresponds to these constraints, the UID is equal to the creator, then the user will be populated and will be able to match the comment to this user. Okay, let's close that up and say if user equals to undefined, this means that the user, the comments.creator UID doesn't exist within our props.users list. So we don't have information on the user yet. Whenever that happens, we must call, and you guessed it probably, the fetch users data. So let's do it right now. Open curly brackets and say props.fetch users data comments I dot creator comma false, and I'm setting the comma false because I don't want to whenever this function is run from the comment.js for the post to be fetched. We don't need that information, so let's keep it as simple as possible. Close that up, okay, and we'll say else. Well, else we want to attach that user to the comment that we are currently on, and for that we'll say comments.i.user will be equal to user, and this will add these attributes to the comments object, the comment object, and then add the information that's relevant to it. However, we can make this somewhat more efficient, and in order to do that, we'll say if comments I dot has on property user. Let's type that down and I'll explain it in a second. So if the comments I, which is the comment object that we are currently on, has these attributes inside it, has this property inside it, then this will be true. If it doesn't, then it will be false. But if it is true, then that means that this comment already has a user attributed to it. In that case, we don't need to run all of this. We can simply continue and move along to the next iteration of the loop. Okay, so that's how we are going to do it. Let's close that up, and there we go. Now, after this loop has finished running, we are going to go below the loop and say set comments to comments. Okay, that way it will update everything, and there we go. Now, however, we must change some things inside our if that we have in here. So in this case, it won't be set comments, it will be match user to comments, because then the match user to comment will take care of setting the comments. Also, if the props to the route params post ID isn't different from post ID, or better yet, is equal to post ID in this case, which is the else, we'll say match user to comment yet again, because, well, we are not just going to run this use effect whenever the props route params post ID gets updated. we must also run it whenever the props.users get updated. Because remember, whenever we fetch the comments, if there is a user that we don't have the information of yet, then this fetch users data will be called. And whenever that fetch users data will be called, we have to know whenever it got the data from the user, and we must rerun this function yet again, just like we are doing in here. So whenever these props.users get updated, finally, whenever this index.js fetch users data runs, so in here you see that this dispatch will happen, and in this dispatch, if you go into users.js, then the users array will get updated. And then it will update, it will rerun the match users to comments, and it will rerun it without fetching all of the comments yet again, because this if will be false. Better yet, this else will be called. So there we go. It should be working right now. However, let's display the information firstly. So in here, we are going to say if item.user is different from undefined, let's say equal. So if it is different from undefined, that means that we can display the name of the user. So interrogation point, 2 points, null. And in here we'll have the view, or better yet, we can even just display the text. So text, it will be not a self-closing tag. We will in here call item.user.name. Okay, let's indent that, and there we go. Right now it should be working, and we are adding the user to the comment. So everything is as it should be. So let's give it a quick run and see if everything checks out. Okay, so I made one small mistake. So let's go into index.js. And in here, when we do the if get post is equal to true, I forgot to remove the user.uid. Okay, so when you do that, and let's go back into our device. If I go into view comments, you'll see that first it fetches the comments, and then some other text appear. Those other texts are the users' names of the creators of the comments. So these will finally be not undefined, and the username may appear. So let's go into our Firestore, and let's try to find those users. So for example, if we go into users, and it will be a kind of a big list, but let's try to do this. So this Ricardo, which wasn't an account created by me, appears right up top in the CHDXJX. So let's see, it is the account with the UID FGJV, whatever, FGJV. Okay, now if you go into posts, into our post comments, and let's try to find it in here, FGJ. There we go. It appears in here. So we have the creator and the text below. All the other comments are from myself, which is the test account, and that's it. Now, if we edit yet another comment, don't forget to like, exclamation point, exclamation point. And if we edit, then this comment will appear in here. And if I go back and then go in again, that don't forget to like appears in here. Okay, and when you go back and in again, you can notice that it doesn't take any time to fetch the users, and that's because all of the users are already within our users array, so there's no need to fetch the data of them yet again. So thank you all so much for watching. Everything is working as it should be. We are able to comment, we are able to posts, we are able to do a lot of things. So Instagram is looking more and more like Instagram. Right now we aren't taking care of the design of it, so it might look a bit rough. However, without much work, we will be able to make it look exactly like Instagram, so don't worry about it at this moment. If you like this video, then don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and yeah, I hope to see you again tomorrow. Ciao!